The call came at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. Not from my sister, not from my mother, from a woman I'd never met, who was crying so hard I had to ask her twice to repeat the number. $63,400 by Friday, or there would be no wedding. My father's exact words, 40 minutes later, were, "Nora, sweetheart, this is real money, not whatever it is you do." He was standing in a building I owned when he said it. I was upstairs on Wealthy Street when the phone rang, in the converted loft above the old hardware showroom. Halfway through a spreadsheet that had stopped making sense around noon. Unknown number, Kalamazoo area code. I almost let it go. "Is this Nora Whitfield?" The voice was young and unsteady. "My name is Dita Ferraro. I'm a coordinator at Kessler and Vine Events. I'm calling about your sister's wedding, and I need you to let me get all the way through this before you say anything." I sat down. She got all the way through it. It took 11 minutes. Blaine Kessler had been collecting deposits for 19 months and had never paid a single vendor. Not one. Every contract, every itemized invoice, every reassuring email with his signature block at the bottom, real paper, all of it, covering nothing. He had closed the office on Monday. His phone went to a full voicemail box. His wife's car was gone from the driveway in East Grand Rapids. 11 couples, roughly $180,000. My sister's wedding was Saturday. "I've called everyone," Dita said. "The caterer, the rental company, the florist in Saugatuck, the sound guy, the 2 people doing setup. They all say the same sentence, word for word, Ms. Whitfield. The same sentence. We were never paid. We're not coming. What does it cost to fix it?" "To rebook everything in 72 hours at rush pricing?" I heard paper. $63,400, and that's if I start today. Outside my window, the parking lot had gone soft and silver in the late August heat. My Subaru sat where it always sat. Third space from the fence, a 2013 with a hairline crack across the windshield that I'd been meaning to fix for 2 years and hadn't, because it didn't affect anything. "You called my parents," I said. "I called your mother first. She hung up on me." A pause. "I don't think she believed I was real. I called your father after that. He was very polite. He said the family had already gone to the edge of what they could do. And then you called me, and then I called you." I want to be careful here, because this is the part people get wrong when I tell it. Dita Ferraro was 29 years old. She had a 4-year-old daughter in daycare in Wyoming, Michigan, and a job that was going to evaporate the second Blaine Kessler surfaced, or the second the state got involved, whichever came first. Calling 11 families to tell them what her employer had done was not a thing anyone had asked her to do. It was, in every practical sense, the last day of her career. She did it anyway. She did it in alphabetical order. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "I'm not on any of the contracts. I'm not the maid of honor. I'm not paying for anything. Why am I on your list at all?" The silence went on long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Because there's a note in your sister's file," she said. "It's not typed. Blaine's assistant scans everything, and this one got scanned with the rest. It's on the back of a seating chart, in handwriting." "What does it say?" "It says, 'If everything falls apart, Nora.'" I did not say anything for a while. Dita waited. She was good at waiting. 6 years of it, professionally, at the back of rooms where other people were having the biggest days of their lives. My sister Sloane had not asked me for help in 34 years. Not for money, not for a ride, not for an opinion. She had built an entire adult life on the load-bearing principle that she did not need anything from me, and I had built mine on letting her keep it. But somewhere in a stranger's filing cabinet, on the back of a seating chart, in pen, she had written my name down as the last thing standing between her and the end of the world, and she had never told me. "Dita, can you conference me into a call with my family? Right now, all of them, on the same line. Yes, give me 2 minutes." It took 4. I spent them standing at the window with my thumb on the edge of the phone, not doing anything, which is not the same as doing nothing. Then the line clicked and my mother's voice came through, already tired. "Nora, why are you on this call? We're handling something." Behind her, I could hear my sister, not words at first, just the sound a person makes when they've been crying long enough that it stopped being an event and started being weather. Then one sentence surfaced, clear as a bell, not directed at anyone. 19 months. I gave him 19 months. I opened my banking app. I want to be honest about this, because I've never told anyone, and it's the only part of the day I'm not proud of. I opened the app and I looked at the number and I did not say anything. 6 seconds, maybe 7. Long enough to notice the shape of the silence I could have chosen. Then I locked the phone and set it face down on the drafting table next to my elbow. And I let my family keep talking as though I were still just a name on a call list. I'd like to tell you I was calculating wire cutoffs, verification calls, the mechanics of it. That would be a cleaner version. What I was actually doing was listening to my mother say something to my father with her hand over the receiver, and thinking about how easy it would be to stay exactly who they thought I was for one more afternoon. Then my father said, "Nora, sweetheart, this is real money, not whatever it is you do." I wasn't being cruel. That's the thing I need you to understand about my father. Gerald Whitfield has spent 30 years in regional claims for an insurance company, and he says hard things in a soft voice as a professional habit. The way you'd tell someone their roof isn't covered. He believed he was sparing me. "Dad." "Honey," my mother now. She always came in second, softer, and it always landed harder. $63,000 is more than you'd make in. She stopped. "I don't want to say it. I don't want to embarrass you." There it was. She thought she was being kind. That is the whole thing, right there. The entire architecture of the last 11 years of my life, in one unfinished sentence. My mother stopped herself from saying the number out loud because she believed the number would hurt me. And she believed the number would hurt me because she believed the number was true. And she had never in her life had a reason to check. "It's fine, Mom." "It is not fine. None of this is fine," my sister said from somewhere far from the phone. I picked my phone back up, turned it over. The banking app was still open. I hadn't closed it. "I can cover it," I said. "All of it. Today." Nobody spoke. I've replayed that silence a lot. It wasn't shock. Shock would have been something. It was the pause people take when someone says a thing that doesn't fit, and they're deciding, kindly, how to move past it without making anyone feel worse. Then my father laughed. Not a mean laugh. That's what I want on the record. It was 3 short notes, warm at the edges. The laugh of a man who thinks his youngest is hurting and has offered the only thing she has, which is the offer itself. "Nora," he exhaled. "Sweetheart, that's a nice thing to say." "It's not a nice thing to say." "You live in a storage unit," Sloane said. She said it fast, out of habit, the way you say a line that's gotten a laugh before. She'd said it first at Christmas 4 years ago, about the loft on Wealthy Street, and everyone had laughed, and it had become a thing the family said. She heard herself do it. There was a small, terrible pause where she heard herself do it. Here is the thing nobody tells you about being underestimated by people who love you. It does not feel like cruelty. It feels like being handled, gently, the way you'd move a chair out of a doorway. Nora, my father said, where exactly would you get that kind of money? I run a company, I said. 38 people. We build scheduling software for regional hospital networks and freight carriers. I've been doing it for 7 years, my father said. Sloan, look it up. I listened to my sister type. I could hear the specific plastic sound of her nails on a laptop, and I knew exactly what she was typing because there was only one thing to type: Nora Whitfield, Grand Rapids. There's nothing, she said. What do you mean nothing? I mean nothing. Dad, there's an Instagram she hasn't posted on since 2019. There's a class photo from Northview. There's a woman in Ohio who sells quilts. A pause. That's it. That's the whole page. What's the company called? Nora? And here is where I made a decision I still turn over at night. I could have said the name. 8 letters. It would have taken half a second, and it would have ended the entire conversation. Because my father, of all the people alive, would have understood it immediately. I didn't say it. It doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. Dad, it wouldn't be on there anyway. We're private. Our clients are hospital systems. Everything we do is under NDA. There's no press because there's nothing to write about. We're a back office that makes sure a nurse in Muskegon gets the right shift. The silence changed temperature. Nora! My father's voice had left pity entirely now and arrived somewhere flat and careful. I've spent 30 years in claims. 30 years. Do you know what my job is? My job is listening to people explain money that isn't there. And I'm going to ask you this once, and I want the truth, and I promise you nobody in this family will be angry. Have you gotten into something you shouldn't have? No? Because I know what desperate sounds like. Honey, I hear it every day. My mother had started crying, not the way my sister was crying, quieter, and underneath it something worse. I could hear her deciding that her youngest daughter was unwell, that the years of the small apartment and the old car and the vague answers had been leading here. And this was the afternoon it arrived. Gerald, she whispered. Gerald, I think we need to... I didn't argue with them. I want to be clear that I could have. I had 11 years of receipts, and I could have read them out loud like a grocery list, and part of me wanted to so badly my jaw hurt. Instead, I muted the call and rang my CFO. Renata Ojeda has worked with me since the 2nd year. She has never once raised her voice, in any language, for any reason. I put her on speaker and unmuted the family, and I said, Renata, I need to send $63,400 today. Personal, not corporate. Talk to me. Okay. Papers. Absolutely no curiosity. Fedwire cuts off customer transfers at 5 Eastern. It's 4:09. That's workable, but it's not comfortable. Fine. Over 50,000, the bank will want 2-level callback verification. So keep your phone free. They'll call the number on file. Not this one. And Nora, this is over the annual exclusion. So you'll file a 709 in April. You don't owe tax on it. It just comes off the lifetime exemption. I'll flag it for Dennis. Do it. Sending you the wire template now. I unmuted fully. Did everyone hear that? Nobody said anything. I have thought about that silence more than any other part of this story. It wasn't disbelief. It was worse and much sadder than disbelief. My family had just listened to 90 seconds of ordinary, boring, verifiable adult life, cutoff times, callback verification, a form number. And not one word of it had a place to land. They had no shelf to put it on. They had spent so long being certain about me that certainty had become the only room in the house, and there was nowhere to set this down. Outside, the Subaru sat in the third space with its cracked windshield while I waited for a bank in Chicago to call me and ask if I was really me. The wire cleared at 4:52. I sent Dita the confirmation screenshot with no message attached. On the family line, my father cleared his throat. "Sloan," he said, "call the bank in the morning. Make sure it isn't a scam." They didn't call me a liar. That would have been easier. They called the bank. Here is what I learned on Wednesday morning. Money is not the same thing as a solution. I had wired $63,400 by 4:52 on Tuesday, and by 10 a.m. Wednesday, I had been turned down by 3 caterers, 2 rental companies, a lighting outfit in Holland, and a woman in Fenville who grows dahlias and hung up on me while I was still saying the word wedding. The West Michigan event business is not big. It is maybe 200 people who all worked each other's weddings before they had companies of their own. Blaine Kessler had walked through the middle of it for 19 months lighting matches, and now the whole trade could smell smoke on anything that came from his direction. "We don't deliver to Harrow Hill anymore," the rental manager told me. "Historical reasons with that venue." What does that mean? It means we don't deliver to Harrow Hill anymore. By noon, I was at my parents' house on Ballard Court, standing in the kitchen doorway while my mother set the table for lunch. She put down 4 place settings. There were 3 of us in the house. I did not say anything about it. I counted them twice, and I did not say anything about it. And that is a thing I would like to explain later, when I understand it better myself. "I don't know what you want me to say, Nora." My mother straightened a fork. "I really don't. I didn't ask you to say anything. Because I look like an idiot." She set it to the fork. "Do you understand that? Barbara Kinney asked about you at Easter, and I told her you were doing part-time work. Part-time work. That's what I said, out of my own mouth, because that's what you let me believe." She finally looked up. "Why would you let me say that?" There it was, 9 years of being small, handed back to me as something I had done to her. I didn't answer. I stood in the doorway and looked at my mother and thought about Christmas. 6 years ago, the living room on Ballard Court, the tree with the same 9 ornaments it's had since 1994. Sloan opened a flat velvet box with a gold chain in it, and everyone made the sound people make. Mine was heavier, rectangular. I remember thinking it might be a cutting board. It was a book, Finding Your Direction, a practical guide to starting over at any age. My mother watched my face while I took the paper off, and when I got to the cover, she said, warmly, with real hope in it, "I thought it might help." The back door opened. My father came in from the garage, and he did not look at me, which was new. He set his keys down very carefully. "I called Dale Buskirk," he said. "He's still in claims, does specialty lines now, and there's a policy. Sloan bought one. She did it right." He rubbed his mouth. "Fraud claims run 6 to 8 weeks minimum. And if the carrier decides Kessler was acting as her agent, not a third party, they can deny it outright. Dale's seen it go both ways." 6 to 8 weeks, Sloan said. She was in the hallway. I don't know how long she'd been there. She had not spoken since Tuesday, not to me. "It doesn't matter," she said. "There's no venue. Larkspur and Vine dropped us Monday morning. Kessler owed them too, 14 months of it." She laughed. 1 syllable. Awful. "So it's a field. We're getting married in a locked field." I picked up my keys. "Be at Harrow Hill tomorrow at 9, I said. "All of you, 9 o'clock. My father finally looked at me. Nora, the place is locked. It's been locked since Monday. There's a chain on the gate. Sloan drove out there. I was already at the door. I know. Driving back down 196 with the windows open, I thought about the wrapping paper. That's the part I have never been able to get past. Not that my mother believed I was a person who needed a book about starting over. She's allowed to be wrong about me. What I couldn't get past was that she went to a store and chose it, and carried it home, and cut the paper to size, and dragged the blade of a scissors along the ribbon so it would curl. She took her time. Thursday morning, I drove out to Fenville alone. 40 minutes on back roads through sweet corn and orchard rows, and I used every one of them to tell myself the truth for the first time in about 7 years. Here's the version I'd practiced. I stayed quiet to protect my privacy, very reasonable, very adult. Here's the real one. Every single time my father introduced me at a party as our other daughter, the one still figuring things out, something inside me went quiet and warm. Because I knew, and they didn't. And that made me the only person in the room who wasn't performing. I built a company worth $11 million a year, and I used it as a place to hide. I let my family be wrong about me, because being wrong about me was the last power I had over them. And I held on to it the way you hold on to a coin in your pocket, turning it over, not spending it. There's a word for that. It isn't privacy. I parked a quarter-mile short of the gate and sat there with the engine off. I want to be precise, because this is the part I'd cut if I were making myself look good. I thought about not going. Not dramatically, just the arithmetic of it. Nobody knew I could stop this. If I turned around, Saturday would collapse, and my family would spend the rest of their lives never once suspecting that the person they'd handled so gently had been holding the whole thing in one hand. I sat there longer than I want to admit. They were already at the gate at 9, all 4 of them, my parents and Sloan and Theo, standing at a padlocked chain in a gravel turnout while grasshoppers went off in the ditch like static. "This is what I'm talking about," my father said. "Nora, it's chained. It's been chained since Monday." I got out of the Subaru and walked past him with a ring of keys. I want to be honest. I'd thought about how to do it, and every version I imagined was a speech. I didn't give one. I unhooked the chain and pushed the gate, and it swung the way it always swings, dragging in the same rut it's dragged in for 4 years. Then I walked into the barn ahead of them, put my hand flat on the panel inside the door, and put in the alarm code without looking at the keypad. The lights came up in banks, first the loft, then the beams, then the whole west wall of glass, all the way down to the vineyard. Nobody moved. "How do you have keys?" my father said. "Larkspur and Vine leases this building." I turned around. "They've leased it for 4 years. The barn, the house, 41 acres. I let it sit. "From me," my mother made a small sound. "The loft on Wealthy Street, too," I said. "I own that building, all of it. You've been parking behind it since 20... And that is when my sister's fiancé took one step forward and said the quietest sentence of the entire week. "I know." Everyone turned. "I've known since March," Theo said. He looked at me first, not at Sloan, and I watched him decide to keep looking at me while he said it. They needed a structural assessment before they raised the loft occupancy. That's my whole job. Gerald, floor loads, assemblies. I had to countersign with the owner of record. He shrugged, helpless. The name on the deed isn't Whitfield. I wouldn't have thought about it twice, except I recognized the handwriting on the signature line. "From where?" Sloan said. "From the card she wrote me when we got engaged," my father said. "Then what's the name on the deed?" I didn't answer him. I don't have a good reason. I stood in my grandmother's county, in a building I'd paid cash for, and I let the question lie there on the floor between us. And my father looked at me for a long moment and then looked away. Sloane didn't look at me at all. She looked at Theo, and I watched my sister do the arithmetic on what it means when the man you're marrying in 2 days keeps another woman's secret from you for 6 months, and then understand immediately, in front of everyone, that he had been right to. Sloane walked out the back doors and kept going until she hit the fence line. I gave her a minute, and then I followed her out into the grass. "Don't," she said. "Okay." We stood there. Down the slope, the vineyard rows ran off toward the Kalamazoo River in that green corduroy way they do in August, and my sister put both hands on the top rail of the fence like she needed it. "I got laid off in April," she said. I didn't say anything. "Restructuring, whole department, April 14th. She laughed at the fence. 4 months. Nora, I've been getting dressed and driving to the Meisure parking lot on Alpine and answering emails from my phone until 3. Does Theo know? Theo's the only one." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. Fast, annoyed. "The BMW's a lease. I'm 2 payments behind. The wedding's on 3 cards. And the deposit I gave Blaine Kessler, the $22,000, I pulled that out of my 401k in June and ate the penalty." The grasshoppers kept going. It was the loudest quiet I've ever stood in. "Why didn't you tell anybody?" And my sister turned around and looked at me like I had asked her why water is wet. "Because I'm the one who's fine." She said it flat. "That's my job. That's my whole job in this family. And I've had it since I was 9 years old. You get to be the disaster. That's yours. Do you know what that's worth? Nobody checks on the one who's fine. Nobody calls to see how the one who's fine is holding up." "Sloane." "You think they loved me more?" Her voice cracked and she let it. "They loved a version of me I had to rebuild from scratch every single year. Every Sunday dinner was a performance review. Every Christmas card was a press release. And you," she pointed at the barn, at all 41 acres of it, "you got to disappear. Do you understand what I'd have given for that? You got to go be a whole other person out here, and nobody even looked. I never got a single day off. Not one, not in 28 years. I stood in the grass and let all of that be true. Here's the thing I did not do. I did not tell her it was okay. I did not tell her I understood, which I did, or that I forgave her, which I didn't, or that we'd both been hurt the same amount, which we hadn't. "That's real," I said, "and it still doesn't make us even." She nodded. She kept nodding. It was the first honest exchange we'd had since roughly 2011. Behind us, a truck came up the gravel. It was a red F-150 older than the Subaru, and my Aunt Margot got out of it in work gloves and started dragging folding chairs off the bed 2 at a time, 60 of them, stacked and strapped, still stenciled. First Methodist Fenville on the seatbacks. "Aunt Margot, don't just stand there." She was 66. She unloaded 40 of those chairs before she let anybody help. Margot is my father's younger sister. She'd taken her name back after the divorce in 2004, not ours, my grandmother's. And I want you to notice that I did not think about that fact once in 20 years. It was just a thing about Aunt Margot. It was on her mailbox. When the truck was empty, she pulled her gloves off and stood next to me and looked out at my sister on the fence line. "They're crying now," she said. "Yeah." "Good. Let them." She said it without any heat at all, which is what made it land. "But don't you dare make it easy for them. Honey, not today, not tomorrow. You make it easy today, and you'll be making it easy for the rest of your life. And one morning, you'll be 66 and unloading chairs by yourself. She looked at me sideways. Ask me how I know. Then she said, That book's still under the seat of your car, isn't it? I looked at her. Saw it in 2019, she said. In the Subaru, didn't say anything then either, and standing there in the grass, I understood something that took the ground out from under me a little. In 7 years, my Aunt Margot had never once asked me what I did for a living. Not once. She was the only person in my family who had never needed to ask. I know this part secondhand, in about 4 sentences, because that is how my father tells things. The rest I know, because afterward I went and looked at the same screen he looked at. Thursday night he couldn't sleep. At 1 a.m, he came downstairs and sat at the kitchen table on Ballard Court and opened my mother's laptop. He didn't search my name. He'd watched Sloan do that and get a quilt store in Ohio. 30 years in regional claims teaches a man exactly one useful thing. And it isn't people, it's records. My father knows that almost everything about a business in this country is a matter of public filing, and that the state of Michigan puts its entire corporate registry on a website that anybody with an internet connection can search at 1 a.m. in their bathrobe. He typed Whitfield, nothing. 2 dentists in Livonia. And then he sat there. He sat there long enough that the screen dimmed, and he had to touch the pad to bring it back. I did not solve it. I want to be fair to him about that, because he's never once claimed he did. He didn't reason it out. What happened was that he was staring at an empty search box at 1 a.m, and what came into his head was a piece of painted plywood that hung over a door in Fenville, Michigan, from 1961 to 1992, that he had spent his entire adult life pretending he could not remember. He typed Ashcombe. 2 results. Ashcombe Systems, LLC, formed 2019. Ashcombe Holdings, LLC, formed 2021. Organizer, both filings, one name, N. Ashcombe. My grandmother was Ruth Ashcombe Whitfield, and she ran a seed and feed store on Main Street in Fenville for 31 years. She sold cover crop and layer mash and tomato steaks and, in spring, bedding plants she started herself in a hoop house out back. She kept a green spiral notebook by the register with a column for who owed her and a column for who she had quietly decided was never going to be able to pay. The second column was longer. She worked until she was 74. My father spent 40 years getting away from that store. That is the true thing at the bottom of my family, and none of us said it out loud until that week. He was ashamed of the smell of feed on his parents' coats at school. He went into insurance because insurance came with a business card and a title and a desk that nobody's mother had swept. He raised 2 daughters in a house on Ballard Court where nobody ever once mentioned the store. And the way he had spoken to me for 11 years, gently, patiently, the way you move a chair out of a doorway, was not something he invented for me. It was secondhand. He'd used it on his own mother first. Friday morning, he drove to Margot's. How long have you known? 7 years, my aunt said. She told him the truth, that in the spring of 2019, I had come out to her house and sat at her kitchen table and asked her permission to use their mother's name, because I was about to file paperwork and I didn't want to put Whitfield on it. And I couldn't fully explain why. She'd said yes in about a second and a half. She had never told anybody. Why not? He said. Margot, why wouldn't you tell me? Because she asked me not to, Margot said. And then, because she is who she is. And because in 20 years, you never asked me one single question about Mom. Friday night, my father came to Wealthy Street. He climbed the stairs to a loft in a building he now knew I owned, and he stood in the doorway and would not come in. And he had two things in his hands. One was a printout, 4 pages, stapled, from a state website. He'd highlighted the word organizer in yellow. The other was a small box. Inside it was a thin gold chain with a flat oval pendant, worn almost smooth. My grandmother wore it every day of her life, over aprons, under coats, for 31 years behind a register. He'd had it in a drawer for 12 years. He set both things on the table by the door. He didn't hug me. He didn't apologize. I want to be accurate. There was no apology, not that night. He said, "I looked it up myself. Nobody told me." And then he went home. My sister got married on Saturday at 4 in the afternoon, and almost nothing about it was what she had spent 19 months paying for. The food came from a taco place on 8th Street in Holland and a bakery in Douglas in 3 trips in the back of Margot's F-150. The chairs said First Methodist Fenville on them and did not match. The flowers were cut Saturday morning off 3 farms within 11 miles and stood in pint jars down the middle of every table, and half of them were zinnias, which nobody plans a wedding around. There was no string quartet. There was a man named Beau who lives next to my aunt and who played an acoustic guitar with a capo on the 2nd fret while my sister walked between 91 folding chairs on grass her grandmother had known. It was the most beautiful room I have ever been in, and I own the building. Then, at the end of dinner, my father stood up with a glass in his hand. I saw Theo get there first. He came around behind the head table while my dad was still buttoning his jacket, and he put a hand on his shoulder and said one sentence into his ear. It was short, 6 words, maybe 8. My father's face changed color. I still don't know what Theo said. I have asked him twice. He's a very kind man and he simply does not answer, and I have decided to let him have it, because my father took the microphone and did it anyway. He started well. He started so well. He talked about Sloan at 9 years old organizing the neighborhood kids into a parade. He talked about my mother. People laughed in the right places. And then he turned toward my end of the table and said, 3 days ago, I found out that my younger daughter owns this land. She owns this barn. She owns 41 acres and 2 buildings in Grand Rapids and a company with 38 employees and $11 million in revenue. And I want every person in this room to know. I sat in a folding chair from a Methodist church basement in a dress I'd had for 4 years, and I understood something I would have paid money not to understand. My father was not proud of me. I was proud of the inventory. The conditions had not been removed. They had been updated. For 34 years, the price of being loved out loud in my family was having something worth listing. And Sloan had paid it every single year until it broke her. And now it was my turn and the number had simply gone up. I stood up. I want to be clear that nothing about it was dramatic. Nobody gasped. Half the room thought I was going to hug him. I walked the 8 feet to where my father was standing, and I put my hand on his forearm and I set it right into the microphone he was holding, because I didn't think to move it. And because I don't think I wanted to. Dad, say it again, without any of the numbers. 91 people got very quiet. My father stood there for 11 seconds. I know it was 11 because Theo's cousin was filming, and I have watched it more times than is healthy. He opened his mouth 3 times. Nothing came out. Not because he was being stubborn, because he did not have it. 63 years old, 30 of them spent explaining coverage to strangers in their kitchens. And the man did not own a single sentence about either of his daughters that did not have an achievement in it. He looked at Sloane. He looked at me. Then he said, "These are my daughters," and he sat down. That was the whole speech. 4 words, and a chair scraping. And then Bo started playing again because Bo is a professional. Later. My sister danced with her husband on a plywood square Theo had built himself and leveled with shims. And I went out the west doors and stood on the grass in the dark where the vineyard starts. I'd had my grandmother's necklace in my fist since 2 o'clock. I hadn't put it on for the ceremony. I'd carried it through the whole afternoon with the chain wound twice around 2 fingers. And by then, the pendant had gone warm, which is a thing that only happens if you hold something for a very long time. I stood out there where nobody could see me, and I unwound it, and I put it on. Sunday morning, my mother made breakfast on Ballard Court and set the table for 4. There were 4 of us. Sloane and Theo had a 9:40 flight out of Grand Rapids and were eating standing up. It was the first time in 3 years that the number of place settings and the number of people in the house had matched. And I noticed it, and this time I said something. "Mom, Wednesday, you set 4. She had her back to me at the stove. "I set 4 every Sunday," she said. "What?" "Every Sunday, for 3 years." She turned the burner off. "I know you're not coming. I'm not confused. Nora, I'm not. I know. I just do it." "Why?" And my mother stood there with a spatula in her hand and could not answer me. She opened her mouth and closed it and looked at the table. And I understood that I was looking at the entire vocabulary she had. Not an apology, not a phone call, a plate. It is the closest thing to love my mother knows how to make with her hands. And I want to say plainly, it is not enough. Both of those are true. I have stopped trying to pick one. "I want to start over," she said. Can we start over, fresh, from today? Can I ask you one thing first? Anything. Do you remember what you gave me for Christmas 6 years ago?" She smiled, ready. Then the smile went uncertain. Then it went away entirely. And she stood in her own kitchen and worked at it. Honestly, worked at it. And I watched her come up with nothing at all. She did not remember. I'm not going to pretend that didn't take something out of me. "It's a book," I said. "It's not under the seat of my car anymore. It's on my desk. I read the whole thing. I underlined parts of it." I didn't explain. I didn't tell her the title. She's welcome to look it up. My mother's hands went still on the counter, and she said, finally, the only sentence I believe she was capable of saying that morning. "I'll try to remember, not I'll change, not I'm so sorry." 4 days of this and that was the honest edge of her. I'd rather have it than a speech. At the door, my father asked me the question he'd been carrying since Friday, whether we could start again, all of us. Whether I'd come Sundays. I'm supposed to tell you I said yes. "I'll think about it," I said. And that is where I left it, on the front step, with my father holding the storm door open. On the way out of town, I stopped at Dita Ferraro's apartment in Wyoming and gave her 2 things. The first was a letter of recommendation on my own letterhead, which is the first time in 7 years that anyone in my family's orbit has seen my letterhead. The second was a retainer with an attorney in Lansing, hers to direct, not mine, for the complaint she and the 10 other couples filed with the Michigan Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division that October. I did not offer her a job. She isn't a stray. She's the most competent person I met that entire week. Margot caught me in the driveway with a sealed envelope. Our grandmother's handwriting on the front. Blue ballpoint, hard press, all capitals, for the one who keeps the books. "She left it with me in 2011, Margot said. Told me I'd know. I put it in my coat pocket. I have not opened it. I drove back to Grand Rapids with the windows down and the cracked windshield throwing its little seam of light across the dash, the way it does at that hour. On the passenger seat, a small box with a gold chain in it, a wedge of wedding cake in foil, and an envelope from a woman who has been dead 12 years. At the light on Fulton, my phone lit up on the console. My mother. I looked at it. I did not pick it up. The light went green and I drove. I didn't answer her that night, or the next one. I answered 11 days later, on a Tuesday, at 2:47 in the afternoon. But that's a different story. I've told this story a few times now, and people split right down the middle on one thing. So I'm going to ask you, my Aunt Margot told me not to make it easy for them. My sister told me she never got a single day off. Both of those were true at the same time, in the same field, about the same family. So, was I right to send the money, or should I have let Saturday fall apart and let them find out the hard way what I was actually worth? Tell me in the comments, and tell me which one of them you'd have forgiven first, my sister, my father, or my mother. I read every single one of these, and I already know the three of them are going to split you. If this one landed, subscribe. There's a second half to what happened 11 days later, and there's an envelope I still haven't opened. I'm telling that one next week.